So welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here. This is, I think this is a conference, right, rich with history. This is a week rich with history for IMS, being our 50th. And I'm not going to talk about that quite as much today, but in my session tomorrow afternoon, we'll spend a little more time on that and kind of what all that means, and do a little bit of a step down memory lane, as well as talking about the present and the future. That's in my session tomorrow. But today, we're really going to talk about a lot of what's here and now with IMS, and really from a kind of a big picture, kind of enterprise architecture type of point of view, right? Figuring out how IMS fits into the bigger picture and how to best take advantage of everything it has to offer. I always test this beforehand, and then it always doesn't work when I start. Maybe I should stop testing it. There we go. All right. Figured it out. All right. So, we all hear about digital transformation. Sometimes I spend a little bit of time talking about what it is. At this point, I mean, just flying here, I saw so many billboards from various tech companies just in the airport, right, about digital transformation, that it's so ubiquitous, right? I think, we're all living it. I think we all know what it means, right? There's change. There's different ways that our consumers are expecting to interact with us. There's different ways that we need to provide the services, maybe the same services, but they just want to be consumed in a different way, right, or via a different medium. And, and it's figuring out, though, how do we effectively deliver on this, right? We all know we need to do it, but the how and, what tools do we use, what architectural patterns do we use, what cultural change, right, may need to happen in support of using those different tools and different approaches. That's the hard part. Right, and that's what we're all kind of picking at bit by bit as we go down this journey to deliver on this, right, as businesses for our consumers. And there's a study that was done, right, of a bunch of CIOs in 2017, close to 5,000 of them, and around some of the challenges with this. And these were some of the points that came out. The ones on the outside are kind of the ones I think I want to focus on for today, right? But just realizing that change is happening at such an unprecedented rate, right? And we say that and we know it, right? But when you really start to think about all the things that are going on, all the things that we need to respond to, from regulation, from business pressures, from just changes in the way that the industry is interacting, right? Folks that are coming up, that the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the fintechs and the likes, right, that are coming in and turning whole industries upside down, right? There just really is huge change going on that we all need to respond to, and that we're very capable of responding to, but but that it is there and it's real, right? And just accepting that. And the other piece here on the right side, right, that fewer than half of organizations reported having an enterprise-wide digital strategy. That's coming in at 41%. Now, it's kind of framed a little bit negatively, right, less than half, but this is almost half. And considering how hard a problem this is, how big our enterprises really are, right, I actually think it's not a terrible number, right? And I think the good news is, hopefully some of what I share with you here today will help to at least fill out what some of that picture could look like. Because I think too often when we say, when CIOs or when companies or leadership is saying, hey, we don't have a full enterprise-wide picture of this, far too often I think Z is one of the pieces that's missing from that picture, right? They may have a strategy on the distributed side, on the mobile, on the cloud, right? But then there's a big question mark, right, about how all of their really core assets that are the ones that are really driving their business get connected into that strategy, right? Now, some companies have it, right? And some of you, may have that. How many do feel like Z and Z Enterprise and IMS are kind of part of your bigger picture company's technology strategy? We got a couple? All right, that's good. Right? And I think, we're seeing more and more of this, right? Because there are very clear ways that you can easily start to integrate it, and that's what I want to help talk about today. Because what do we think, the study also talked about and surveyed what are the biggest impediments to digital success, right? Anybody have a guess? Biggest impediments to achieving digital transformation? People resources is one. So, yep, what else? Cost is another.
I think everything starts with business strategy. How the digital transformation will improve the business?
All right.
Otherwise, no reason to do digital transformation.
All right, so just to repeat for the recording, that it's really about starting with a business strategy and understand, not just doing digital transformation for the sake of it or for the sake of technology, but really understanding the business value that you're going to get out of it. Any other guesses? So the top reason actually is resistance to change. It's cultural, right? And it's the one that we often think about the least. And that sometimes, I think, makes it that much more difficult because it's kind of insidious, right? It's there, and we may have this strategy. Maybe we understand the value. Maybe we've figured out all these great tools and approaches. Maybe we even have the budget to go do it. And then, what happens? And that's an interesting one, right? I mean, that's not something that a vendor or that I or that anyone can necessarily go solve for you. But it is something to be aware of, right? And it is something, right, that we can certainly help with in terms of conversations and bringing it up and addressing it and, talking about it because, I'm not going to talk about it in this talk, but, within IMS, we've been going through our own, I would say, kind of digital transformation journey, you could almost say, really changing our internal processes around Agile and more DevOps practices and continuous delivery, right? And that's been a tools and a, process and whatever change, but the biggest part of the change has really been cultural. And so that's something that we've had to focus on, and I would say just on a personal note, it's something that's kind of a passion of mine. So if anybody wants to have a side conversation about that later, I'm happy to do that because I think it's an interesting challenge, and it's one that's so important to the success. Coming in second is lack of budget. That definitely came out, right, in cost. But I think it's important that it's second, right? It's actually not first. Oftentimes there is budget, or at least enough budget to get started, right, to start to do some incremental changes. And that really it's the cultural aspect that we need to be aware of. And some of this also, kind of again thinking much bigger picture around corporations and why potentially Z gets left out, some of that is cultural as well, right? Maybe there's some bias that's there historically or lack of understanding, right, as to why, people don't know how to solve it, they're afraid of it, so they don't dive in to figure it out, right? They go focus on the things that they know how to do. And everyone in this room I know understands this, right? But IBM Z is absolutely vital to our businesses, to the world, right? I mean, we do over 2 billion transactions a second on the platform. There's $6 trillion in card payments that are processed annually on the platform. And really 80% of the world's corporate data, right, resides on Z. Right, and IMS is definitely a big part of this. About half of our ZOS customer base does have IMS. We've got, many of the banks and insurance and all of that, right, running on IMS. We've got some sparklers around, I think 265 billion transactions a day that run on IMS, 3 million a second. So there's, we have huge volumes, right? IMS is a big, big part of this overall platform and how important it is. And there's huge opportunity with digital transformation, right? So these are some value points that were done out of an IDC study around what digital transformation on the mainframe and having an open and connected platform, right? Basically connecting your mainframe into the rest of your enterprise and the rest of your strategy, right? And how much value that can bring your business, right? Both in terms of cost savings, right? By infrastructure reduction costs, potentially licensing costs. But I think the bigger interesting point, right, is the growth opportunity, right? Because if you're just in a cost situation, right, and you're just a cost center and you just keep, getting looked at that way, only thing people want to do with a cost center is make it cost less, right? But if you're a revenue generating center, right, if you can be part of what's driving the business and what's driving new revenue for the business, that's how you get investment, right? And that's what digital transformation and connecting the mainframe and those core assets into that business value and that business strategy, that's what really changes the conversation. And that's what can drive 300% return on investment over 5 years when you invest in these things. That's what can drive $200 million in additional revenue. And so there's a massive opportunity here that we all need to help influence, right? And there's lots of ways we can do that, right? From taking some of this content that I know I haven't gotten to the details yet, but I will, taking it back with you, right? Sharing it, getting to the right person to get them to start to look at it. And then also being part of the positive cultural change, right? When we get asked to do something, think about how we do it as opposed to how it's hard or what the risk. I mean, we need to think about all of those things, but don't think only about that, right? Think about how do we make it happen in a way that's safe and effective, right? As opposed to, ooh, that's going to change. Ooh, I don't know how I'm going to manage that. Ooh, my process is going to change, right? And so, thinking ourselves, right, about, how we approach these problems and become part of that positive cultural change around driving this for our business. So, there's kind of some key ways, right, that we think about doing this. Definitely integrating Z, right, into the bigger picture is a clear, bright path forward. And thinking about cloud, right, and how do we bring cloud to Z, and how do we bring Z to the cloud? And really, it's about that whole ecosystem and how we deliver the digital transformation value. So we've put together this model across IBM Z, and I realize there's a lot of stuff on this chart. You don't have to read everything. I'm going to kind of walk you through it a bit. But we really wanted to put together a model that kind of encompasses, everything that, we think is important on this journey. And you'll notice there are no product names on this chart, right? Because we really didn't want to think about it from a product focus. We wanted to think about it from a solution focus, right? What are the things that you need to do? And think about it from a persona basis as well, right? So there's different personas or roles, right? And everybody kind of plays their part in this bigger picture to drive this transformational journey. Starting at the bottom here, we've got run and maintain. And this is important, right? But if you only do this, you're not going to get the results that you need, right? This is kind of the good hygiene of making sure that you're on the latest versions, right? That you've got the latest, version of IMS, you've got, you're up on your compilers, up on ZOS, right? You're applying maintenance, right? All that stuff, right? And all that's important, but that's table stakes, right? Like that's what we need to do to sort of have a healthy baseline, but it doesn't propel you forward, right? There's so many clients who, may be on one of the latest versions of IMS, but are using the feature set circa, version 8, maybe worse, right? And there's reasons for that, right? And some of that I'll address again tomorrow in my talk tomorrow and what we're doing to help you break out of that cycle. But I would, kind of implore you that that's not enough, right? And so that's why the model is really focused on what's above this, right? And so, kind of starting on the left-hand side, right, it's a kind of a maturity model that goes across to the right, but it's not like you have to do A before you do B, right? You can kind of pick and choose and move around these different parts of the model. But, kind of starting on the left, you see a lot of it has to do with APIs, right? Because we really think of that as kind of the gateway into this digital transformation approach. It's, in many cases, low-hanging fruit that you can implement easily and get massive, massive value out of. And I'm going to spend some time talking about that. But once you kind of start implementing those APIs, maybe you start with a simple one, right? One that, the transaction maybe is good as it is, right? Or the piece of application logic is good as it is. You can just API enable it and then go, right? And that's great. But once you start to do that, once you start to get that value out of it, you might say, oh, well, now I need some more, right? And the more might be in areas that aren't quite so clean cut, right? Maybe you need to start to change things a little bit, right? In order to adjust the logic, either augment or change in order to fit into what you're trying to do. And that's when you start to kind of think about, okay, well, what languages am I using on the platform? And absolutely for many of these, right, you can continue to use COBOL, right? It is a best fit language in some cases, right, for what you're trying to do. But it's not your only option on the platform, right? And there could be other reasons, skills, and other things, right, in terms of why you'd want to branch out and maybe look at Java, maybe look at Node, right, and kind of think about some of those other languages on the platform and how that augments. And as you start to do more changes, right, then obviously speed to delivery is something that's really key to many of our businesses and to achieving, and competing successfully in this market. And so then you start to think about, okay, well, how, right? How do I deliver these changes safely, with minimal risk and quickly, right? And that's where kind of testing practices come in. That's where some of the DevOps pieces come in. And really, what is your underlying continuous integration and delivery pipeline, that can help you to achieve those changes, again, in a safe, effective way, but quickly. And once you are pushing more things in, now thinking about the operational aspects, right? And how are we getting visibility into our systems? How are we potentially bringing in some more advanced analytics to look at these things, be more predictive about understanding the impact of these changes that we're now rapidly introducing into our environments, which I know sounds really scary, right? But there are ways, right, to maintain and manage and mitigate these risks that can support you in that. So we'll dive in first into the API economy, and I'll probably spend kind of the bulk of the time here. This really, as I said, is kind of the gateway drug, right, into digital transformation. It's enabling a REST API on top of an asset that then, a developer on any other platform can leverage without having to have any Z knowledge, doesn't even have to know that it came from Z, right, is a huge opportunity, right, to be able to easily integrate and leverage those assets. And we're seeing more and more that applications are becoming strategic, right? That these applications that are driving these engagement models with our consumers are absolutely strategic to our businesses. And so having Z participate in that is important for the business and for the platform. So, here's where we do start to get into some product, right, and some, okay, here's an approach, right, that is a solution to this, right? And one of those is EOS Connect. How many folks here have heard of EOS Connect? All right, almost everyone. We're doing good. How many folks are using EOS Connect? All right, a little less, about a quarter. That's good. That's good. So, we're seeing huge uptake with EOS Connect, and I'm going to share some success stories. But in a nutshell, what it is a way for us to provide a really easy way for you to turn your Z assets into RESTful APIs that then developers on any platform can consume. And we did something really right on this product for once, I would say. Often we have our kind of silos, right? We've got DB2, we've got IMS, we've got Kix, we've got MQ, and some new industry trend comes along, say SOAP or XML or whatever. We all go figure it out our own way, and then we let you figure out how to implement it, right? What we did with EOS Connect is different. Everybody in the IBM Z family is at the table on this. And with EOS Connect, we provide one solution, right? One interface, one tooling interface that you use to build your APIs. And then within the product, we hide all the garbage behind about what's special about each individual runtime. So, you can build APIs against IMS in the same way that you build them against Kix, right? And DB2 is part of this, and MQ is part of this as well. And so, from an ease of use, right, standpoint, it's huge value, and it's something that we've really focused on as well, right? Who are the personas who are involved in this? How do we break it up? How do we make sure it's the right experience? You don't have to write any code in order to build an API. So it's really powerful. And we've also really focused on being part of open standards. So you see on the left side that Open API initiative, it was formerly called Swagger. This is the industry standard, that's been built by a consortium of a number of companies, IBM, Google, others, around how do you document, how do you define an API? And so we've implemented and pulled in, this open API standard with everything that we do. So it can easily integrate into any other API management tool that you may have, right? And certainly IBM has one. It's called IBM API Connect. But there are many other in the industry, Apogee, MuleSoft, right? There's a long list. And we work well with all of them because we've implemented this standard. So whatever you choose, you as a company, you choose to do in terms of your API management strategy, EOS Connect can fit into it seamlessly, so long as they're also following the standard, which most are. We also have a number of additional capabilities surrounding this. There's the data virtualization manager, which helps you get at assets that we may not have built into EOS Connect directly. Things, so you can actually go access vSAM and you can access IMS database, although we've got a statement of direction around some direct access for that as well. But there's a number of different, so basically you can get to SMS file, like whatever, right? Anything on the platform basically now you can access. And they just kind of plug in to EOS Connect sort of like any other subsystem. So again, you still have that common API building experience, but now you can get access to so many more things on the platform. And then we've got, like I said, a number of other tools. I'm not going to go through all of them, right? But helping to discover and understand what's out there, that can be half the challenge. Figuring out what makes sense to API enable, what assets do I have out there that should be API enabled. And so we've got some discovery tools as well that can help you to figure that out. So thinking about these APIs, and I may have covered some of this already, but it's really about that API access to the mainframe and the comprehensive subsystem support I talked about, and that point-and-click API creation, right? So again, it's a UI. We've had a panel of clients at, trying to think what the conference was called. It was before Think Interconnect. That we had like 4 or 5 different clients who did a panel session, and they talked about how easy it is. I mean, they literally can build an API in 15 minutes, right? Once the product's installed, which isn't that bad either. And these were clients saying it. It's one thing for me to sit here and say it, right? But these were clients that were up there saying how easy it was to build. So there really is, clients are seeing a really huge value prop around this. And so I want to talk about a couple client examples. So on the left here, if you've heard about EOS Connect, some of these may be familiar. I think I've got a new one in here, though, that you may not have heard about. But on the left here, right, this was one of our early adopters, and this is an Australian bank. And they had this process where if you want to open an account, you could request it online, but then the back-end process required some manual stuff, right? Because it eventually had to go to the mainframe, and the mainframe was not connected to their website. And so it actually took them 3 days in order for that account to actually get opened, right? So you've got this consumer, right, saying, hey, I want to give you my money, right? And you're saying, oh, hold on, we need 3 days before we can take your money, right? And that's potential lost clients, because you know what, as a consumer, I can go find someone else who will take my money right now, right? And it's also lost revenue during that period of time, even if they do stick with you, because that's 3 days, right? You could have been investing it and leveraging it and getting value out of that money. So they actually did a hackathon, a one-day hackathon within their company, and they turned this open an account into a RESTful API. And the CIO saw it and was like, you can do this on the mainframe, really? I want it now, basically, right? Like, how fast can you get it for me? I want it for my shareholders meeting, a few months from now, right? And so they actually got it into production within a couple months. And then, in the first 3 months, they gained 5,500 new accounts that they estimate they would have otherwise lost based on, what they'd been seeing historically. They had $150 million in ledger, 3 days longer, again, just in 3 months, right? And they saved 750 hours in the call center because of all that processing that had to happen in the back end to do it manually, right? So when we talk about turning the mainframe from a cost center into a revenue center, right? That's what we're talking about. And it was a simple API, right? Opening an account, API, boom, right? And look at the huge business value. And this changed the tone in that bank around the conversation around the mainframe, right? They'd been looking at Oracle, they'd been looking at other alternatives, and they're like, because they thought they didn't understand what they could do, right? And now that they understand and actually how easy it is, they're like, okay, forget that, right? Why invest? Why do all that risk? Why all of that? You know, it's kind of a make work project to hopefully end up at something, you know, roughly equivalent. But, you know, just leverage what you've got and start getting value out of it, right? And so this was a huge story. This other one was a North American insurance company, and they wanted to provide new payment services to their clients. They wanted to provide Apple Pay and PayPal. And, you know, again, they engaged us. We helped do kind of a little session with them to get started. And then within a few months, they were in production with both of these payment services. Again, you know, ultimately back-ending to the mainframe, which is where the payment transaction was happening. Now, also here, we've got an example of where this was another North American bank, and they had a cloud application built using microservices, and they were already accessing Z, but it was fairly clunky. And they were providing that access actually with, you know, customized services that then they actually charged for. So again, it's kind of a revenue generating solution for them. And what they did, so this was sort of what they were doing, how they were doing it before EOS Connect. And so, you know, they were accessing IMS, they were in the cloud, right? They had their microservices app, but they had to have all this kind of like custom IBM, IMS, Z stuff in order to effectively do it, right? They had to have an adapter, they had to have a COBOL to Java Pojo app in there, right, to kind of do the conversion. They had to introduce COBOL copybooks, right, to be able to then drive it, to drive the things that they wanted. And so this involved a lot more people. It's obviously more costly, you know, limited skills, higher maintenance, right, and something that in the long run might be difficult to maintain. With EOS Connect, they just built the API, and then from the microservice, they could directly access that API into IMS. So it's much more future-proofed, it's cleaner, there's less stuff to maintain, there's less skills that are required, right? And so it really was transformative them, right, and provided huge cost saving and future-proofing for them to have this access.
Excuse me.
Yes.
That didn't have IMS Connect there. Even though you have the API with Z and stuff, to get to IMS, you're still using IMS Connect.
IMS, yeah, so that's part of, you know, EOS Connect will go through IMS Connect.
Right.
Yeah. All right, and then, so we've mostly talked about kind of accessing Z, right? But we can also do it the other way, which is, you know, your Z application and calling out maybe to services that are out there outside of the mainframe, right? So we had a North American bank who was leveraging third-party services for custom pricing around mortgages and GICs, right? And so rather than kind of maintaining all this logic internally, they kind of outsourced it. So they said, hey, let's partner with this third party, let's leverage their service, just call into their API as part of our process. And they were able to, with EOS Connect, we have something we call Outbound Support now. And we're able to actually enable you to call out to APIs externally and then integrate it into your application. And we provide kind of all the stub code as to how you put that into your logic. Yeah?
But to do outbound, you still need some other product with EOS Connect, like SOAP Gateway or?
You don't need SOAP Gateway. I mean, you can still go through IMS Connect, right? I mean, ultimately when it comes in, right? So SOAP Gateway is not required for anything with this.
Yeah, just a comment here. Actually, last version of the EOS Connect, it's outbound and inbound, both sides. So do not require any additional product.
Right, yeah. So maybe you're thinking of an earlier version of EOS Connect, because this was a new feature set that came out in version 3, I believe, of EOS Connect to enable the outbound.
One problem that we always had that even for outbound calls in IMS, they require the client to open a connection and pull IMS, unless you had something like SOAP Gateway or some other product.
Yeah, so just to
That's a
repeat
big
the
deal.
answer, part of what the solution here is we provide the stub code, right? And that's sort of what I was talking about. We provide the code gen, right? But we provide the stub code, right, that you integrate into your copybook or whatever you've got, right, to be able to then to provide that integration. Yeah, and we have done it with IMS. Yep. All right, and then we've got another North American insurance company here who wanted to leverage an outside analytics service to drive real-time scoring of rate quotes. Right, so again, lots of opportunities, especially with everything that's happening in the banking industry and with fintechs. Right, there's huge opportunity to potentially partner with some of those, right, and leverage that innovation in the industry, right, but as part of your core business to differentiate faster. All right, so I kind of talked a bit about this progression in the beginning on that overall digital transformation model, right? But this is kind of a more simplified version of some of the key points there, right? So starting on the left, right, really it's starting with that API enabling, right, and all the huge value that you can get from it, and that it's really pretty easy to do and easy to start. But then once you do start to do that, right, you might want to start building new functions, right? You might want to be transforming some of your existing assets or existing capabilities in order to provide those integration services, more in the way that the business needs them. And that's when you start to think about the best fit languages. So, whether it's COBOL, Java, Node.js, Swift is certainly out there on the platform as well. These are things that you start to kind of grow into, and you don't just do it for the sake of like, oh, well, let me use the buzzword, right? But it's, thinking about, okay, I have now this problem, right? The business needs this. What's going to be the best way to achieve it, right? And we'll talk a bit more about that as well. And eventually, as you start to do this, you can actually start to transform, right, from these kind of do-it-all, right, aka monolith, right, applications, and become more discrete, more callable, right, and heading towards a microservices architecture, or at least participating, right, in a microservices architecture as part of your overall enterprise strategy. But again, underpinning all of this, right, is the how, right, and that is the DevOps, right, and how do you enable these changes? How do you do it safely? How do you do it in a way that you can monitor, that you can understand the risk, that it's fully tested, that you're confident in? And this is a tools and a process. This is also a culture, right? Culture is a huge, huge part of DevOps because we have to really change the way we think about things and how we work, right, every day, which is hard, but important and can provide a lot of value. So let's talk about best fit languages. So if you think about, kind of step back to kind of industry trends here, right, and what's been happening, on the right side, right, we have a lot of our back-end services, right, and IBM Z is over there, IMS is over there, right, and we've been, in a lot of cases, kind of focused on, risk management, kind of keeping things locked down, but what's been happening out on the other side, right, is massive agility, right, changing things quickly. New apps all the time, changing apps all the time, changing services. And the developers who start there as kind of on the UI, right, whether it's web or mobile, right, are using a set of tools and they have a huge, massive pressure to respond very quickly. And as they've started to grow, they actually start going down the stack, right? So you might start as just working on the UI, but having that wall between you and the back end slows you down. And so the developers, kind of start to work more on the back end of the front end, right? And so the back end servers that maybe support the server logic, right, that support some of that processing on the front end interfaces. And those, though, that's not where it stops, right, as we all know, right? It has to kind of keep going deeper into the enterprise and kind of deeper into the back end systems. And, they don't want to suddenly kind of hit a brick wall, right, in terms of where now you're separated, now you can't, you have to work in a different language, right? And so you see, that's why we see Node.js, right, becoming so popular in the marketplace, because folks who are working with JSON and JavaScript, right, on the web now want a server-side JavaScript, right, because they want to keep working in that language and progress down the stack into kind of microservices that eventually, need to connect into our systems, right? And this is why we're seeing, so much pressure on this, right, in the marketplace, because this has kind of been the evolution of how application development has evolved. And so, we've done a lot, and it's also why we need these languages on the platform. Because if you don't have a need for them yet, I'm sure you will. And we've done a lot, especially with Java. I'm not going to go into all of these details, but Java runs better on Z than it runs on any other platform, period, right? Not a lot of people are aware of that. I mean, we run multiple times faster than on even the highest benchmark distributed systems for Java. And that's because we leverage our connectedness to the stack. So we actually work with the hardware teams, we work with the firmware teams, and our Java and our Java development teams, right, to really provide tight integration, to be able to leverage things on the hardware and really have this full stack integration that is able to make it so much faster. A big problem in Java is garbage collection. So Java is great as a language because it does memory management for you. You don't have to worry about a lost pointer or whatever else, right? But the price of that, that memory getting managed for you is often, the JVM at times has to sort of stop the world, right? Go figure out what's not needed anymore, collect it all, right, and get rid of it, right? That's the garbage collection. And it can provide unexpected pauses or performance impacts, right, to your application. And developers do all kinds of things to tune and all this stuff, right, to try to minimize that, right? So it's a huge pain point in Java development at scale, right? And everything we do at Z is on scale, right? What we've done is really, we haven't entirely eliminated, but we have significantly reduced the pauses that happen because we've been able to tie into the hardware and kind of keep track of things a little bit more in advance and as we're going so that we can kind of clean it up on the side without having to stop the world. So that's one of the things, right? But there's a number of other improvements, and again, it's really about this like symbiotic relationship and how we're really able to take advantage of the platform and the integration of the platform to make this run better here. So if you've got Java going on in your enterprise, right, and there's a good chance that it would, whatever they've got it running elsewhere could run faster and cheaper on Z, especially with zip offloads and everything else, right, which helps to mitigate costs, to run that Java on Z. And then it's really just a deployment choice, right? It's Java runs on everything, so something to consider. And why you want to be using Java as well, right, with IMS is obviously skills is a big thing, right? Java developers are ubiquitous, right, out in the market. There's over 14 million of them. Everyone who comes out of college has at least some experience with Java. And so, it's a huge skills opportunity, right, to be able to leverage. And, so it makes your applications then easier to maintain, more cost effective, and, very DevOps ready. Not to say you can't do DevOps on all the other things, right, but there's a lot of kind of standard tools that just easily plug and play in. And when we think about Java with IMS, you can use Java to access the TM side directly, right? So we've got a Java framework that we've had out there actually for quite a long time, I think over 15 years, that we have continued to evolve so that you can directly access TM, and we provide all the kind of the Java frameworks and tooling around that to help you to do that. We also have a client who's been very active in using this, Fiducia and GAD, and they're, I think, a great example because they've gone into it for a lot of the reasons around skills, around wanting to take advantage of a larger application developer base within their company, and but they've got a lot of COBOL. They've got a lot of historical COBOL. But whenever they need to go in and change or modify or extend, rather than doing it in COBOL, they do it in Java, right? And then they integrate the Java into the COBOL. And you can, and we're looking at ways to make that easier to do. We actually have some work going on between us and the compilers and a number of folks to kind of have some simplification around this area. But it's very possible, and a company has been doing it at scale for now a number of years. And they've actually, there's a little link here, read the full story. They've actually co-written a paper with us, mostly written by them. We mostly edited. Mostly written by them around their experience and how they did it, right? And it's quite an exhaustive paper. So if you're interested in this at all, or if you've got application developers, right, or architects in your company that are interested at all, I'd encourage you to send them this. And so we're talking about kind of the TM access, but you can also use it for database access in conjunction with our open database support. So how many folks are using or looking at Java in their enterprise with IMS? We got one? All right. Everyone has some work to do. Yeah.
Well, I have some customers that have some highly running, efficient IMS transactions. I try to talk them into going from COBOL to Java for some of the more CPU intensive ones to try to save some cycles off of the zips.
Right.
They're afraid that Java won't perform as well as their COBOL, and it'll slow processes down. I wonder if that is indeed the case.
So, I mean, Java is an interpreted language, so it won't necessarily always be as fast as COBOL. But, the question, I think, becomes how fast do you need it to be? Right. And again, Java runs better here than it's going to run anywhere else. So, we have... True. Not always. So, I think you do need to look at what you're doing. We have had clients who have successfully moved things from COBOL to Java, achieved cost savings, and not had performance issues with it. So, it may be more of a perceived problem, right, than a real blocker.
I find the most limiting thing to get Java to replace COBOL is one thing that IBM mentions is how to get those changes through your change management system and the whole process. It has nothing to do with your product, endeavor, and other things. There has to be lots of time and work and then to change these things to allow a person to select that. And that's the thing that's never mentioned. It's not about how it runs once it's get there. It's how to change everything, all our tools, to get in a different type of language.
Yeah, so just to repeat, the question or comment was the thing that we don't always talk about that is the bigger inhibitor for the platform is not how well it runs once it gets there, but what's the tool chain, what's the process change that needs to happen in order to enable that. And then that's a great point. And so when I get to the DevOps section, I will talk about that actually. So you're kind of helping to lead the witness here. I appreciate that. I should pay you afterwards. And it's something that I would say, at least within IMS, I think historically we haven't been focused enough on. But that has changed, is changing. We've got a much bigger focus on the application developer, what their experience is, and trying to put a lot more collateral and materials and information out there about how you do it, and working with sponsor users. And where we do find, okay, this is a problem that maybe we haven't solved, let's go fix it. And so we've got as Tyler talked about, our internal transformation, we've got a whole squad focused on the application developer and the application development experience with IMS. And so we've been working on a number of improvements and collateral there. And actually a lot of the collateral is already live. We've got whole websites on Java. We've been putting out a lot of blogs. We've got a bunch of stuff on GitHub that I'll talk about at the end. So we've been doing a lot in this space, because I agree, it is a pain point, and I think you're right, it probably is the biggest inhibitor, has been the biggest inhibitor, and so that's something that we're working to address. So open database, so this is really, let's see, how many folks have looked at or are using open database? All right, we've got more on this one. We got about a quarter of the folks here. That's great. So this is really about enabling, standard SQL access, JDBC access, right, to your data assets directly. And again, this helps with skills, right? It helps, so folks your app developers don't have to know DL1, right? And really being able to help enable that. And so there's a number of ways, right, that you can leverage it. You can have distributed access, actually, through IMS Connect and the open database for the whether you're using the open database directly, or if you're, just need the Java drivers out of it. You can also access it from an app server, maybe running on Z, or from if you've got a Kix transaction that wants to drive into the IMS database, right? And you can also be running, from if you've got Java running directly in a JMP, right, within IMS accessing. So, you've got a lot of options here, depending on, where you're coming from, what your application needs. But, there's lots of ways to be able to get that direct access with SQL to your IMS data. And, open database is not where we stopped, right? It really was the beginning of a lot of transformation around the IMS database. We've also implemented a catalog, right, which really helps to give that visibility and that kind of overall management, right? It enables an ecosystem as well of kind of management and different tools around the IMS database that then enable you to be able to get insight, to be able to do things, kind of turns your IMS data from a black box into, something that you can actually see into, understand what's there, and leverage. And many of you may be aware, this is something that we believe is so foundational. We are making, we've issued a statement of direction that we plan to make it required at some point in the future. And we're working with a number of sponsor users around that to make sure that, we have that fully vetted, that we've got our clients buy-in, that it works across a number of different clients. I think we've got 8 to 10 sponsor users, very large clients, right, that we're working with right now, some of which are looking to go into production later this year or early next year. So, this is something that we're committed to the quality of, and that we are very actively working, again, with our clients to ensure that it is ready. And we're not going to make it required until we are 100% confident that it is. So everyone wants to ask me for a date. I don't have a date. We're not going to force a date on this. It's going to be when it's ready and when our clients tell us it's ready.
If I may, could you ask how many people are actually using the catalog?
Sure. How many people are using the catalog so far? All right. We got 3. A little less than a quarter. About 20%, I'd say, here in this audience. Was there something, did you want to add on to that? No?
It was more of a curiosity question.
Yeah.
On the list server, there's quite a bit of, some people just can't understand why the catalog exists. They don't have any interest. Some go completely other ways.
Yeah. So
It hasn't been really stable. I've played with it, and I've had to restore things quite a few times. We aren't even using it in production.
I want to point out that many of the serious catalog users do not use this server. It's not there. So we'll never hear about them until this is better sources.
Well, that's a convenient answer, isn't it?
So just to summarize for the recording, there's a comment of, questioning, seeing comments on the listserv about folks questioning the value of it, the stability of it. There was another comment in response saying that most of the clients who are using it aren't actually on the listserv, and that these personally supported them. So I don't want to completely discount, right, some of the concerns around it. That's why it's not required today, right? So it's the IMS client base, right? Everybody has very unique, very different environments, right? And so it's been part of the challenge. And that's why us working with sponsor users are so important, right? We want sponsor users who have very different environments, right? Who have very different setups, who have, so that we can flush all those out, right, ahead of time, right? Working with real clients, because no matter how much we test, we will never test every single possible configuration, right, that is out there in the client base. And so that's why we're being, I would say, very cautious, right, about this. We're being aggressive, right, because we want to move forward. We think this is important. We're very focused. We've got a lot of folks working on this, but we're being aggressive in a smart way. All right. So the other thing I would add here, right, is where this leads to, and you're talking about questioning the value of the catalog. catalog itself is foundational, right? It's kind of like that run and maintain, right, on that first one. It's good, but it's not going to get you to digital transformation, right? The catalog is good, but by itself, it doesn't get you to digital transformation, right? But you need it in order to do the rest. And so that, to me, is really a lot of what the value is around the catalog. It's that base foundation. And it's been a chicken and an egg thing with our clients, right? They don't want to do it because, well, where am I going to get out of it? No tool vendor or anyone else wants to build tools on top of it because no clients have it. It's not a smart investment. And so we just have been stuck, right? And so that's part also of why we're trying to push this forward, because I think it will be a huge bonus to the ecosystem and the health and the vitality around IMS as a whole. But we got to get past the first step. And one of the first things where you start to get value on top of it is dynamic change in DDL, right? This is a much more simplified, easier, automated way to make changes to your database. And so this is something that's also been out there and is that kind of that next step in that value chain. All right, and here's an example of a client who has implemented the catalog, who has implemented Open Database, and they've really used it to help integrate their IMS data into their enterprise data architecture. So it's easier access for their developers, for the folks who are leveraging the data, and they're able to integrate it in a more transparent and integrated way right across their entire platform. And they've been in production for years now. All right, so this is kind of a little bit more starting to get slightly future looking. Today Node.js runs on ZOS, right? And you can access, via ZOS Connect, right? Provide a REST API to any of your assets, and Node applications can then access them. Direct Node access, right, into some of these is not there yet, right? There's varying degrees of kind of implementation or looking at this. We have heard the requirement for direct node access into IMS applications and data. Does anyone here feel like they have that requirement? Nobody yet? Okay. So this is one, right, where we're definitely interested in hearing more from clients about what their use cases are for doing it this way versus via APIs and ZOS Connect. And if you are interested, we'd like to work with you as a sponsor user or even just pick your brain, for an hour about that. So if it does come up in the future, please feel free to reach out and let us know, and we're happy to work with you and hear your feedback on it. But we are looking at, and we do intend to deliver this support, but again, we want to do it in conjunction with sponsor users and client validation around this. But this is something, this is kind of more forward-looking, something that we do intend to support. So let's talk about DevOps. And I've been talking, I'm going to go a little bit faster here because I'm a little short on time. But, this is, yes, there are tools, and I'll be talking about some tools and things, right? But at the end of the day, DevOps is a culture, right? And you need, if you're going to go down this path, right, you got to address that along with the tool set. Otherwise, you'll fail. And you do it in steps, right? And there's a lot of pain points, right, when we do try to go change these business critical applications, which is why sometimes our reaction is, oh, hold on, don't change them, right? There's worried about risk and what it's going to do to the system. There's a lot of manual things that are involved, right, in driving some of these changes. Maybe we don't have great documentation on some of the applications or the code, right, that we're trying to change or enable. And, skills can be an issue. We've got limited folks who are able to do the changes, right, which can kind of scope it down. And I would add on here monitoring as well, right? How do we have good monitoring, right, end to end of these changes that we then put in? And so one of the things that I think is kind of a foundational step, right, again, thinking about doing DevOps and stages, it's not like you go from here to here all in one big bang, right? If you try to do that, you will fail. You want to do it really incrementally, right? And it's not like just doing it for the sake of doing it either, right? Think about what your pain points are. What's slow? What's slowing you down? What's not automated? And what are things that kind of become that low-hanging fruit to start to piece by piece change such that you get value out of it, right? And so ZOSMF is something that's free, free tool with base COS, I believe starting in 2.2. And it allows you to basically kind of use a UI and kind of script out an automation of various tasks on the platform. And we've got a client, a Nordics-based bank, who has used this heavily and really gotten into it. And they're seeing huge benefits around a lot of their testing procedures, whether they're testing new IMS function, using it in terms of how they apply maintenance, as well as a lot of their custom user mods and home written exits and programs, right, which is a whole nother set of kind of the ecosystem, right, that we all have out there and need to manage. And the one thing that's cool about this is, yes, you automate it. It's easier for like the new person coming in to then be able to run it, and you kind of, it becomes self-documenting, right, as well. But it also becomes REST API enabled. And once it's REST API enabled, then you can start to hook it into all of those other DevOps tools that are out there, right, which kind of show up here in this next one, right? So if you've got Jenkins, or if you've got Maven, or, well, Maven's for building, but if you've got Jenkins and other kind of automation procedures, right, in terms of how you automating the build, automating the deploy, automating running test cases, if all those, creating a test environment, if you've got that automated with a ZOSMF flow, right, it can, boom, get automated into this, Jenkins pipeline process, right, and you can start to use these tools with there, right? Now you asked earlier about kind of Java and, why some of that's tough. Maybe you don't want to put it in Endeavor, right? Maybe you want to use GitHub or RTC or some others. And I realize, there are some, you've got source code and different things, and that's some of the pain points, right, that we're actually working on kind of documenting, like how you approach doing this. If, we'd actually love to hear feedback on it, right, and what your pain points have been, so that we can make sure that we're helping to address those, because I agree, some of that can be a bit clunky, and that's what we're working to document better, as well as just improve on. So love to hear your feedback on that afterwards. Thinking about from an operational perspective, say you get these changes out, you're getting them out fast, you're deploying them. Now how do you monitor them, right? And often we have a problem in our enterprises that our operations are siloed, right? Our monitoring capabilities are siloed, basically by the technology stack. And at best, even if you can get end-to-end, often the mainframe is left out, right? And so if there's a problem, it becomes this finger-pointing exercise of, oh, it's you, oh no, it's you, it's not us, right? And you become, rather than everyone trying to solve the problem, you're trying to prove it's not you, right? Which isn't really productive to actually solving the problem. And so we've actually, we've got a product, IBM Z, that we're partnering with AppDynamics, and to really provide this end-to-end view of the enterprise. And prior to our integration, they could do everything, and then they'd have a little cloud for IBM Z, right, with no information. And so what we've done with IBM Z, that plugin basically helps to provide then, this this ability to see, okay, what's happening in IMS Connect, what's happening in IMS, and then you can drill down into that and actually get that visibility. So you do have that full end-to-end viewpoint. We're wrapping up. I know I'm short on time. I was going to kind of reiterate this, but I think I've kind of hit the points, right? That you can start with APIs that leads to more application changes, right? And then you also need to think about the monitoring implications, right? And how you provide DevOps to empower all of this flow, right? These are some common patterns within IMS that are used to support this. We're here to help you. We've got a program called IMS Makerspace, which is basically we can come on site, we can help you figure out what business problems make sense for you to solve. We'll work with you. This is kind of the evolution of our DPO, or Deployment Project Office, if you've heard of that before, right? But it's more kind of end-to-end, helping you, find the right problem, figure out the right solution to it, and then help you get into production and implementation with it. GitHub, we've been a huge investment on GitHub. We've got a lot of resources out here about Java, about database, about APIs, and we're adding to it all the time. And we've got ZTrial. If you want to go out on the web and actually just get an IMS system provisioned for a few days, be able to go in and play with it. You know, we've got some scenarios built out there, but it's great for new folks. And also a whole bunch of the tooling around it, so EOS Connect is out there. This is really a small subset. There's a ton of ZTrials out there. If you want to go look at and learn and play with anything that I've talked about today, there's probably a ZTrial for it. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Perfect.